Just a reminder that the Missing Witches podcast is entirely listener-funded. If you love the project and want to support us and join in on conversations like this one live, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/missingwitches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch.
Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch.
You must be a witch.
Welcome to the Missing Witches podcast.
Hi, everybody.
In brokenhearted, exhausted times.
Yeah, there's
in gathering together times.
There's a lot going on, and we haven't done one of these just Risa and Amy chats in so long. We thought it might be a good opportunity to catch everybody up and catch up with each other.
Yeah. See each other's faces. It's the summer, man. Whatever the fuck else is going on, it's the summer. And we'd had so much fun playing with a 2-episode-a-week format. And we will go back to that because we really love writing those meditations. And we really love hearing from you about them. Those have been such like a joy for us. But we're in like full research and writing mode. We're finishing the second book. And we're preparing for the next season, which will have like scripted stories again about true histories of missing and occulted knowledge, badass fucking witches, women, and gender expansive people who have shit to teach us. Also, go babe. No,
I just wanted to repeat this little story that someone once asked Risa if we weren't afraid we were going to run out of historical witches at some point, and we can tell you, no, we're not afraid of that. Every time we discover one witch, there are 4 witches that come out in the research. So no worries, we will never run out of witches that we've been missing. Never.
No. And we have so many more ways now of learning from them. I feel like we learn so much from the people that we get to meet and interview about how to do research, about how to like just imagine what we think, about how to interview people, like connect with families, connect with archives. Like we learn more about how to tell those stories and how to kind of slip into the margins as we do this. So
yes.
Yeah, we got a lot of fucking stories to tell. We're really excited.
I do admit that sometimes I feel like a bit of that, like Joe Rogan, just like a meathead who got lucky and gets to talk to really exciting and interesting people. Sometimes I feel like I'm like, what? Whoa. And I feel like maybe I'm getting outsmarted at every turn, but I love that. I never wanted to be the smartest person in the room. I want to learn from the smartest people in the room.
Yeah, I just want to get to be in the fucking room.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
I will build that room if it means I get to be in it.
Yeah, but for those of you who are listening, like definitely let us know if you have encountered an amazing witch, either like in your personal contemporary life or in a book or in your research about your own genealogy. Definitely let us know. Send us an email at missingwitches@gmail.com. We're never going to run out of witches, but we're always happy to hear about the ones that y'all are finding too.
Yeah, you are the reason we never run out, I think.
Yeah.
So that sort of is why we're taking a step back. This is going to be a summer of like hangs. Like Risa and Amy are going to touch base a little bit more. My life is fucking upside down, to be totally honest. Like I don't even know where I live now. We went home for one day. We've been on the road for like a month. My partner's mom was rushed to the hospital, and then out of the kind of blue received like a very life-ending cancer diagnosis. We've had a bit of a reprieve now where she's like awake and making plans and chatty. I'm planning to come home, and so we've all moved into Mark's parents' house, like his brothers, May, Mark, and I. Like we're just circling up the wagons here to surround her with love and to help support their family and all the caregiving that's going to be needed, and we'll just be here until the end, I guess, and probably after. We went home for one day, and I know in the coven, in the Patreon coven, I missed a conversation about magical places, and I was doing all these moves and then got home for one day to my magical place, like we were just there. The wind was in the trees, the light was on the lake, and we were like, okay. I managed to get my plants out of their little buckets and into great big pots, and like give some love to the beings I'd been tending, and then we left again. So that's my update. That's my deep sighs. That's my like we're in an encounter with death right now, and with all the ways it suddenly moves like a wave through lives. So we're going to try to be gentle with ourselves this summer.
Yeah, we definitely have had like the spring of mortality confrontation, and the summer is not looking any less mortal than the spring was.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
No. And one of my girlfriends, one of our coven mates, texted me that she got laid off from her job. And I mean, what do you say? Like, we can't financially, support everyone.
Barely ourselves.
Ourselves. But the first thing I texted back to her was like, we just want to like frolic in the woods and like pick berries and like wash our faces in the creek. Like, why do we have to deal with getting laid off and having to pay our way through life?
Yeah, I'm really interested. I've been reading more about mutual aid societies and the history of that practice. It comes directly from Black Panther activism and ideologies. But mutual aid society is really interesting because it's not about a handout. It's about a mutual hand holding, right? It's about like stepping outside of capitalism to be like, what do I have that I can offer you? How can I support you? So how can I implement that on small scales, like within a tenants' rights organization, within like a apartment Facebook group, with in our lake association? Like, what are small ways that I can introduce anarchy and communism without using those words to scare my old neighbors?
Yeah. I mean, you brought up the Black Panthers, and they started out as like a free breakfast group,
right?
And then ultimately became like labeled as a terrorist organization. And somebody like Fred Hampton, who was assassinated by police, was someone that I would consider to be a role model for all of us in exactly this kind of mutual aid that you're talking about. We sort of, I read this book, maybe it's beside me. No, it's not. It's called Modern Utopia. And it talks about these communes that started in the 60s. And there's this notion that we got in the 80s, when we were growing up, that like, the hippies grew up and they joined the establishment because they realized that like it was stupid to, insert anti-capitalist action idea here. But based on my research, what more often happened was that these communes were bulldozed. The government would change the zoning of an area so that they basically were illegalizing these communes. So again, I mean, it's a fight. It's not going to be easy to fight capitalism, even if you get it all together and you've got your patch of land and you've got your like-minded people. You're still going to have to fight against either those people in your life who don't believe in what you're doing, those people in your life who are mocking you for even having these ideals and claiming that they're childish, when we know that they're more adult than, than anything. This is going to be a fight, and you have to fight. We all do. We all have to fight, and it's exhausting. Yeah. We're exhausted. But the fight will continue. There will be the 1% who are always going around in their back doors and with their secret occulted knowledge to make sure that we are under this pressure. And I don't have any advice except for, just like recognize that it's not going to be easy, that it's not going to be a question of like, we've decided that we're going to be a mutual benefit to each other. And then that's it. I mean,
I think holding on to the total joy of the vision, like the total brilliant, restful joy of the vision, like we were recently like on a back porch in the night, and there's fireflies all around us, and the trees were all blowing all summery. And my friend Brad, this wonderful painter, was saying, I dream every day of the revolution. Like I dream of how fun it will be. Like I can just see how fun it will be. Like he's like, when we were protesting here in Quebec to protect affordable education, like free education here, fighting for free education here. And every day we took to the streets and we had pots and pans and we made food and we rode our bikes and we took back the city. It was like this taste. And he's like, we do everything cool. The left does everything cool. He's like, when do the organizers of Pop Montreal and Osheaga decide that they're building the revolution in the middle of St. Catherine Street? Like, when do the cool fucking bands and the cool fucking artists and the cool fucking architects, like, when are we dislodged enough that we build the new world in the middle of it, all of this, that we overthrow capitalism? It was like, his vision of it was so joyful. And then I was just reading, I just put this quote in to the 13th chapter, the end of our book. We can edit out my ums here. Where is she?
We're not. We can be human.
Yeah. So Emma Goldman, anarchist activist, feminist, radical hero, she's often quoted as having said, like, if I can't dance in your revolution, I don't want a part of it. But the full quote is, I want to pull up, I actually just have a little piece of it here, but I want to pull up the longer thing for us here. The full quote is from her 1931 autobiography. She wrote, "At the dances, I was one of the most untiring and gayest. One evening, a cousin of Sasha's, a young boy, took me aside, and with a grave face, as if he were about to announce the death of a dear comrade, he whispered to me that it did not behoove an agitator to dance. Certainly not with such reckless abandon, anyway. It was undignified for one who was on the way to become a force in the anarchist movement. My frivolity would only hurt the cause. I grew furious at the impudent interference of the boy. I told him to mind his own business. I was tired of having the cause constantly thrown into my face. I did not believe that a cause which stood for a beautiful ideal, for anarchism, for release and freedom from conventions and prejudice, should demand the denial of life and joy. I insisted that our cause could not expect me to become a nun, and that the movement should not be turned into a cloister. If it meant that, I did not want it. I want freedom, the right to self-expression, everybody's right to beautiful, radiant things. Anarchism meant that to me, and I would live it in spite of the whole world, prisons, persecution, everything. Yes, in spite of the condemnation of my own comrades, I would live my beautiful ideal."
Yeah.
I want to hold that. Like, I want to hold the work of people at the NAP ministry. I just want to I don't know. I want to refuse to be burnt out, I want to take naps and believe in beautiful, joyful things for everyone.
Yeah. D.H. Lawrence said, if you make a revolution, make it for fun.
Right.
Right. And I mean, this is very serious business. There are lives at stake. You know, what happened with Roe v. Wade in the States. One statistician sort of concluded that, you know, maternal death in birth, people dying in childbirth, will increase by 1/3. This is life and death for real. This is actual life and death stuff. But at the same time, we have to be fighting for something. We can't just be fighting against. We have to be fighting for, and that means, like, you know, radical acts of joy. This is what we're fighting for what Risa's saying, to not feel burnt out by daily life, and instead to be allowed joy. Joy that doesn't cost us anything, joy that doesn't, you know, make us confront our own mortality, joy that we can't be arrested for, the joy of freedom and choice. I mean, ultimately, I think it was Marigold Santos who said that witchcraft is choice, magic is choice. It all comes down to the ability to make choices. And it doesn't always feel like we can choose to be joyful. It doesn't always feel like that. But there is always space for that. There's always, especially in my family. I mean, I don't know if I would recommend this to our listeners, but humor is how we deal with things. Humor is how we've always dealt with everything. I've never been to a funeral and not made a joke. I've never been to a funeral and not had a joke made to me. And you see Jinx Monsoon does this all the time. You know, Jinx will say something traumatic and then go, I think I know I do that. One of my friends called me out for it. She was like, you don't have to put ha 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 after everything you say. And I think it's because, you know, you get scared. The heaviness is scary and you don't want to put it on anybody else. And maybe you don't want somebody to feel sorry for you, like you're asking for pity. And so you add a little ha 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 at the end of there to lighten things up. Again, it's probably a trauma response on my part, but at the same time, like there's always going to be a little room for ha ha ha. Like Steel Magnolias. Right. Laughter through tears is one of my favorite emotions. I think it was Sally Field who said.
Right. But also, like, if you're going to be that person at the church group or the Stitch and Bitch or the Collective Kitchen or whatever, that's like telling the fucking truth, you know, that's like bringing up the dark shit, or that's like inviting people to care for each other in ways that resist capitalism, then put a little ha-ha at the end, makes it a little bit disarming, you know. throw in a joke when you drop that witch knowledge. Ease them into it. It's a fucking spell.
Yeah, laughing is my favorite, you know. I like laughing, I like singing, I like that moment when you crawl into bed and you're so tired and you get home and you crawl into your bed. That's like one of my favorite things in the world. So again, I mean, it's easier to be anti-capitalist and live a sort of financially modest life when your great joys are truly like laughter, crawling into bed after a long day. Mm-hmm. These aren't expensive hobbies.
No. And we can find community, and that will help a lot, you know, like people have been working for decades to protect the right to body autonomy and our right to choose whether, as people with uteruses, we're going to bring humans into the world. Those organizations exist. They've existed for a really long time. They have a lot of expertise. They're very, very, very good at what they do. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, you don't have to feel like totally desperate and alone. Like there are organizations you can learn from, you can volunteer with, and you can turn to for help. And there's I really think that like church groups, basement groups, like the old ladies in basements are what got Canada healthcare. They are the activists that got Canada healthcare. So like be the seeds that invade and sporulate all of these different community spaces and tell them the truth, and listen to them.
I love the women's auxiliary, it was called at my church growing up. And this notion of that Lolly said that we quote all the time, which is like just about finding your own place in the revolution. And for some people, this is like knitting, trivets that they were gonna, or one of my friends has a collection of like hand knitted slippers that only gets them from church bazaars. It's the best place. She's like, I only buy these slippers from church bazaars because it's like an old lady who made them and they really know what the fuck they're doing. And this is the 1,000th pair that she's made. And so she knows what she's doing. But my point here is to say, like, not everyone's place in the revolution is going to be the same. Some of us are going to be knitting for revolution. The women's auxiliary at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church, shout out. Like making bookmarks and slippers and, coasters. That is a huge part, But I also often tell the story that like during the Hungarian Revolution, my father took up arms and, tried to free political prisoners and ended up walking from Hungary to Austria to go and stay at a refugee camp. Not everyone's revolution is going to look like that. And I want to remind you that it doesn't have to. You don't have to be at the front line with a machine gun in order to be valuable. It doesn't have to be splashy. It doesn't have to be violent. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way. I mean, at some point, it will probably come to it where we will all have to make that sacrifice of our own personal safety and comfort. But not every act of revolution is the kind that they teach us about in history books. It's a lot of women's auxiliaries knitting furiously to raise money for whatever they're doing.
Yeah, write your angry letters, do that too. But also tell us your stories of your heroic ancestors. I think we're going to need them, Tell us your stories, because for so long we were like, gosh, what would it be like for me, to live in a time where there was violent fascists at the door? How would I find the courage? What would I do? And our grandparents know. In some cases, our parents know. In many parts of the world, people are living this right now, So let's share stories of heroism too, of witchcraft and heroism. I'll tell you, my grandmother, as a young teenager, all the kids, they were in Denmark when the Nazis invaded. The Allies would drop gun parts into their schoolyard when they flew over. And the kids would gather the gun parts and hide them at the bottom of their sealskin bags and then bike them past the German soldiers on the bridge. My grandmother was like, she had to pee. She was fucking terrified. And then her bike broke. She had gun parts and she was right in front of the soldier. And like, it would stand out if a Danish kid didn't stop to fix their bike. Like all the kids fixed their own bikes. If she just kept going, it would draw attention to herself. So she had to like stand in front of this German soldier with committing an offense that would have had her imprisoned, where many of her friends, older brothers and sisters were in prison already. And she stood and fixed the fucking bike in front of the officer and then got back on and biked around the corner and peed herself and puked and delivered the fucking gun parts, And that was like the first of many stories of being like a young kid. But the funny one, the one I always remember, and this is like not the heartbreaking ones, but the funny one I remember was that she said everybody in Denmark was resisting, like whether they were doing it quietly or they were smuggling guns, like almost everybody was resisting. And the one she remembered that gave them all so much was that in this vegetable seller's window, he like lined up potatoes that all looked exactly the same and lined them up like a bunch of like soldiers. And the Danes thought it was hilarious because they were all just like copies of each other. You know, it was like a joke about the Germans just being fucking copycats, fascists, just like following the rules of violence or whatever. And so they would all walk by and laugh hysterically. But like the Germans didn't see the joke in it. And it was like, I don't know, you can be the potato seller with the joke too, you know, and the gun smuggler.
Sneaky, 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 right? Like we're witches. We are used to doing our workings, you know, behind the scenes and in the dark, in working our mysterious ways. This is not new to us. This is not new to us. There's so many times, like, think about, you know, maybe you have like some sort of pendant necklace and 100 people would look at the necklace and see nothing, but one witch sees it and it's like, oh, are you you know, insert whatever your pendant symbol is. And it's the same with the potatoes, right? Like you can let people know that you are in this together. You can give them secret knowledge without saying a word, just by lining up potatoes in your own artistic method. I'm definitely going to keep that, you know, like I replace everything in my life with metaphors, you know, like, so now it'll be like lining up the potatoes. Just going to go line up some potatoes, you know. We're going to make resistance art today. We're going to line up some potatoes.
Yeah. She was fiery as fuck. I definitely, she's on my altar all the time. She was so fucking fierce and traumatized by it. I mean, you don't escape unscathed these times, but.
No, let's not forget like the urinating and vomiting part of the story, you know, like the fixing the bike story is cool and the gun part story is cool, but usually there's going to be a urinating and vomiting part of any given story, whether literally or figuratively.
Yeah. The other part of the story I love, and I'll leave out the sort of dark, complicated middle, but she was caught and she was in a prison, and they were going to be maybe transferred to a concentration camp. She was in a prison where like much higher up leaders of Danish resistance were being held. She was really just, you know, a kid helping run errands or whatever. She was helping out. But she was caught and she was in there. And then the resistance like did a raid and got them out. And, you know, in versions of the story, she had to shoot someone on her way out. She was pretty traumatized by it. But then she hid in plain sight. Her parents got her a job with a German family, like as like a maid and a nanny. And she stayed there, you know, for like, and worked for them for the last like weeks of the war, just so she could be safe, so she could hide. And then when news came on the radio that the war was over, the Germans had been defeated, she ran through the house knocking over all their fucking flags. The German flags everywhere. She knocked them all down. She was a teenager, you know.
Right.
And she like hitchhiked all the way home.
Because we live in symbolism, right? Like knocking over a pole with a piece of material on it is of no consequence here or there, but the symbolic nature of the act is obviously huge.
Yeah.
And we witches understand that there is a link between, this is what our spells are. It's a link between our symbolic actions and, you know, our material lives.
Yeah. I think that's why those stories of the witches, you know, drawing down the cone of power to help bring about the end of the war, like, that I think that story holds so much fascination, and so, or of like Aleister Crowley teaching Winston Churchill like to flash the V for victory sign because the Nazis were obsessed with symbolism and they saw it as a symbolic shape that could resist the power of the swastika or something. There is an undercurrent language of symbols that is part of this I don't know, material language of violence. There is a part of what happens in the material world that is completely determined by our language, our ideas about each other, our ideas about what matters.
Yeah. And I mean, stay tuned for our upcoming book. I think it's going to come out at the beginning of next spring, but we dive into this a lot, that, fascists and totalitarians will use ritual and ceremony and occult symbology to their favor, to their power, and then use that same system to to burn witches, they will mock us. They will equate what we're doing with, I don't know, like a essential oil MLM, and multi-level marketing in witchcraft are not the same thing.
Important side note, in case you were wondering.
Please. Pyramids are cool. Pyramid schemes, not so much.
Not cool.
But this is what I mean to say, fascists will use these tools and then mock us for using those tools. And to me, that means that they and we should know that they have power. That magic has power. And you say that in the street outside of, this coven that we've created, and you will be mocked relentlessly. And it's interesting to me to think about that, what society wants to mock and why. I think, for me, it always comes back to young women. Young women are, across the universe, the most degraded type of human that we have. And why is that? To me, it's because they're so fucking powerful that they're scary. That young women are so fucking powerful that they are scary. And we have to take that power away from them. We have to remove their power. Otherwise, who knows? Who knows? We might end capitalism. We might end war if we were actually allowed to let young women have a voice that's not demeaned, that's not thrown away like chewed bubble gum, pink and sweet and soft like chewed bubble gum.
Right. And used like a resource, like a mind resource. Like, you look at Britney Spears and that whole history, and then you tie it back to like fucking Leonora Carrington and like these artists where they got tangled up in or like escaped their lives by jumping into these artistic movements that believed that like young pubescent women had the secrets of the universe that were outside of control, and so we should probably have sex with them as 50-year-old men, and not, like
I really like
you were so close there, but fuck you.
Yeah, and this is why we find like so many of these like great men of magic had that piece of their, we'll call it a practice, that involved like the sexual exploitation of whoever they could get their hands on, basically.
However the fuck they could get their hands on. And often men, they were sexually exploiting young men too, and queer people and gender expansive people. So
I mean, I really
just fuck everything. Sorry. Why is everybody the worst?
I mean, it's, as always, like, to me, it's the hypocrisy. There's this movement to like ban drag shows for children, drag shows that are created for children, like, reading in libraries, like stuff like that. And obviously there's an aspect of drag that is underground and very adult, and there's no reason for children to be involved. But then we have queens like, for example, Nina West, who is like a Disney princess who, is again going and reading to children in libraries and not reading like porn to the children in libraries, but reading like Clifford the Big Red Dog, just to sort of normalize difference, which is great, which is what children need. But then we have this Christian right who is so worried about drag queens and their children, but have nothing to say with clergy and their children. And I saw someone tweet recently, they were like, I would rather leave my child with a drag queen than with a priest.
Yeah, fuck.
Statistically.
Like, just going on the numbers.
And then all of this like right-wing conversation around protecting children, even going back to this, bodily autonomy argument. It's about protecting children. And then they're voting against a bill that would, help aid with the formula crisis that we just had, where there was like a formula shortage. And all these people who are so heaved up about protecting children in the bathroom are voting against these bills. It's the hypocrisy for me. Me.
If you're protecting children, then fucking guarantee a right to healthcare, or go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit unless you guarantee healthcare. I don't believe you. Go fuck off.
Yeah.
I mean, a shout out to my suburban mom's hometown library that was all over the news in Canada for having a drag story time. And then, they got a bunch of complaints and they were on the news for getting complaints, and they just fucking doubled down. They were like, yeah, we're booking more. Yeah. They're a huge success. Go fuck yourself. Everybody loves dress up.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say the same thing about Z Budapest, as problematic as she is, and we acknowledge the problematic nature of some of her politics. But again, in our other hand, we hold the amazing things, the brave things that Z did do. And one of them was she was just going to do a reading at a library. It was not a big deal. It was like something that would have just happened and nothing would have happened and life would have gone on. But someone from the 700 Club found out that there was a witch who was going to be doing an event at a library. And so they bust in. The 700 Club is like a church TV show, basically, for those of you who haven't heard of it. So this church group bust people in from all over California to picket what essentially was like a little old lady who was going to do a reading at a library for children during the month of October. Bust people in from all over the state. Like, is this a good use of your time? Is this a good use of your political clout? No. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just answer my rhetorical question with a big fat no. No. How is this even a good use of time?
No. Healthcare for all, housing for all, guaranteed livable income for all. And then I will listen to you talk bullshit about tarot. If you care about people, take care of their lives. Then fine. Talk to me that you don't like it when we look at cards. I don't give a shit. I don't want to hear about your book. I don't believe in your Bible. I don't want to hear about it. Take care of people.
Yeah. And to me, like I'm a bit of a Bible apologist these days,
Yeah.
I've come back around, but it's like anything. It's literally like anything. You can take any issue, any sentence, any word, and you can say, this means this. Because this is, once again, the symbolic nature of the world that we live in, where we can both be looking at the exact same sentence, the exact same piece of art, the exact same drag queen story hour, and come away with a completely different version of what that means.
Mm. Yeah, and this is why I hesitate to even talk too much about witchcraft and why I care about it. I enjoy it. I like writing about it. I think it's like the perfect meeting place for me, for my politics and spirituality and artistic practice. But I don't care about the word. I don't really care about these fights about words, I just want everybody to be safe and get to do radiant, joyful things. I don't want to get distracted anymore. I will work with your church group or your Satan group or whatever, as long as we're working for guaranteed livable income and healthcare for all. What are we doing?
Right. You know, and I've said this about so romantic relationships specifically, like about dating. And, you know, I've had like a series of what I would call successful relationships. Like I'm pretty that's just the universe agreeing with what I'm saying.
Is that your successful relationship?
Yeah. Yes. That's my alarm that tells me, hey, you know, you're protected, you're safe, you're loved. I forgot to turn it off, but yes, it happens every day, and the harps come and surround me with angelic symbolism. But my point is this: I don't remember. A series of good relationships, the reason being that I don't know.
My point is this: I don't remember.
Yeah, this is where we've come to.
That's where our brains are at. How are your brains?
Sometimes when the harp angels come. Oh, I remember. Is because values are important to me. And this, again, just because we got lost and then we're found, why I believe that I have had successful romantic relationships. Because to me, I mean, I've had conversations with friends of mine, you know, people who are close to me, where I'm like, first date, I want to know if you expressly identify as feminist. And one of my girlfriends was like, oh, well, that's a bit. Oh, yeah. What if the guy is like, you know, he doesn't expressly identify as feminist because he just doesn't know what the word and
No, I'm not teaching you that shit.
Yeah, no second date. No second date. I'm sorry.
I'll lend you some books, but we're not dating.
No, you know what? At this point in my life, it's not my job. It's not my job. Somebody asked me once, like, why do you not like Jordan Peterson? He's got some good whatever. And fair enough. I say this all the time. Listen, Hitler loved animals. Hitler was so good to his dogs. By modern standards, this makes me feel like I should hate dogs. Because the very, very bad man liked dogs. Therefore, in this like either or binary system of values, you know, like the cult of personality, where I can say, like, I'm sure Jordan Peterson makes some great points there.
He's probably said something correct once, but he's a fucktard.
Even a stop clock tells the right time twice a day, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and they were asking me, like, well, why do you? And I was like, honestly, he just seems like a dick. All politics aside, I don't want to be around someone who I feel like is always like trying to get me, or like my mother remarried. Imagine if my mother went and they were like, oh, hello, Mrs. Torek. And she was like, oh, it's actually Mrs. Stanley now. And they were like, no. Like, you just seem like a dick. And I don't want to sit and spend an hour listening to someone be a dick on the radio.
No, that guy hates women and children. That guy's no good. Watch out for that guy.
And I mean, I'm sure someone could Frankenbite a clip together based on the last 5 minutes of Amy saying, like, Jordan Peterson, not so bad. And that's not what I'm saying at all.
That's not what she's saying.
But what I am saying is that if you share values with someone, this you need to find out on day one. Yeah. And I'm sorry, like, you can educate people and you can be compassionate and meet them where they are. I hear that all the time. Meet them where they are. And that's fine. And I get that. And we all have families, people that like, they're going to be attached to us, whether we are cool with that or not. And we, you know, even those of us who are estranged from our families, we had DNA, our bodies keep track. Our bodies hold memories that our brains can't even deal with right now. All of that stuff. But in terms of the relationships that we are choosing, yes, ask on the first date, do you expressly identify as feminist? Where do you stand on bodily autonomy? Ask. Yeah. Because I'm sorry, you want to be in a relationship with someone for 3 years and then find out that they have no respect for you? Fundamentally, not me. So again, lost and found. My point is, like, find out if the people that you're giving your time and energy to share your values, and whether that's in romantic relationships or in your political relationships, in your coven, find out.
Yeah. I think you can work with people of different values as long as they're not dicks to try to make incremental change, regulatory change, for sure. But absolutely, for the people that you let close to your body, there's no, the people that live in your home, the person you're going to build a life with, I think prioritize your safety. You're not safe with someone who doesn't believe you have a right to body autonomy, who thinks if you got raped, you have to keep a child, who doesn't believe that feminism is the right way forward for equality between beings, who doesn't believe in trans rights and queer rights. Like, don't let somebody make love to you who doesn't believe that other people are people. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Take that off the table.
Yeah. Just take it right off the table. Because I agree with you completely. We don't have to be completely unified in all of our thinking in order to work together to make change. We don't have to. We can be different and agree on this one thing and work toward that one thing. Mm-hmm. But with the Roe v. Wade overturn, I saw so many women on social media saying, like, well, my boyfriend of this many years just said that. Did it really never come up?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe this is the thing about finding our place in the revolution. If you are looking at your life and it has never come up, let's bring it up. I'm a big advocate of ruining Christmas dinner. I've done it many, many times. I will ruin a Christmas dinner. Yeah. I'm sorry. Like, don't.
I will fuck up your birthday if your boyfriend is a shithead.
Because if this person is looking at me and willing to make me uncomfortable, then why should I not be willing to make them equally uncomfortable with my stance? They know that they're upsetting you with their stance. And our only reason to not fight back is because you don't want to make waves. You don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. Well, I feel uncomfortable. And the only thing that's going to make me feel more comfortable in this situation is if I know that I can speak my mind. So guess what, Uncle Larry? I'm going to speak my mind, and I will ruin a Christmas. I will ruin a Christmas.
And if you are in a relationship and you just found out that the person you're in a relationship with doesn't adhere to your fundamental values, or legitimately doesn't believe you have the same rights as them, doesn't believe you have the same rights to protect and own your body, get the fuck out. Like, it'll be scary and hard, but you will find a more beautiful world on the other side of asserting that basic boundary for yourself. I promise. I promise.
Yeah. I mean, this we didn't set out to make this like a relationship advice column, but
the thing about the episodes where Risa and Amy just talk is we have no idea what will happen. We will yell at each other advice about random things.
Yeah.
That's what we can promise you for this summer.
I mean, this is something that comes up at our Patreon coven meetings all the time, where we come up with these wonderful themes and then abandon them within 30 seconds. Our coven comes to their meeting with what they want to talk about. And I love that too. It's all about that, like, de-hierarchizing the whole system, and just because this is the theme that we thought of, well, the muses have something else to say. The muses have decided that the theme is this. Like, don't fuck somebody who doesn't think that you have bodily rights.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, this is something that you brought up, universal basic income, which is something that Martin Luther King talked about before he was assassinated.
Hey.
And something that I realized years ago when the conversation was really sort of starting to pick up heat is how many women are stuck in abusive relationships strictly for financial reasons because they can't afford to leave. So to me, if this was the only argument for universal basic income, this would be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, we live in a capitalist hellscape, I mean, hellscape because, like, while our lives are very, very comfortable, a lot of us, there's no agency. Again, there's no choice. We have iPhones and most of us have roofs over our heads, but there's no way out.
Yeah.
There's no way out. And so that means it's not a choice. And that's why I call it a hellscape, because I'm all about that choice, you know?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, again, if people are staying in abusive relationships because they can't afford to leave, then that to me is the capitalist hellscape that I'm talking about, you know?
Yeah, that's it. So I was digging back into things I'd written before because I was working on the conclusion of the book today. And I was looking for this Leonard Cohen poem. And I found this piece I had written for a basic income event I organized. And yeah, it has in it, you know, that according to the Transition Home Survey, on a single day in Canada, 4,645 women were residing in shelters across Canada. 71% of them were escaping abuse. And we know that up to 40% of youth experiencing homelessness identify as lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, questioning, or two-spirited, whereas only 7% of the general youth population identifies as LGBTQ2. In other words, young people face poverty for being who they are. Men account for 3/4 of suicides in Canada. Going back to the Great Depression, scholars see spikes in suicides immediately after a market crash. Canadian men between the ages of 50 and 69 had the highest suicide rate across both genders and all age groups in 2012. Job and money concerns, their identities as providers, are the most common cause of their stress. Patriarchy and poverty fuck with us all. Yes. And then the poem at the end. This is the Leonard Cohen poem that I went looking for, because I always come back to this. I fucking love that guy. Another problematic ancestor. But he wrote this: any system you contrive without us will be brought down. We warned you before, and nothing that you built has stood. Hear it as you lean over your blueprint. Hear it as you roll up your sleeve. Hear it once again. Any system you contrive without us will be brought down. You have your drugs, you have your guns, you have your pyramids, your pentagons. With all your grass and bullets, you cannot hunt us anymore. All that we disclose of ourselves forever is this warning. Nothing that you built has stood. Any system you contrive without us will be brought down.
Just gonna sit in that for a second.
That is our threat and our promise.
And we are, for Lamas, we had already planned this before the Roe v. Wade situation, that we are going to do our Lama special centered around bodily autonomy, abortion rights, shouting abortions. I have been in touch with an abortion doula, which before I met her, I had never heard this turn of phrase. It makes perfect sense. A doula is someone who guides someone from one state to another, shall we say. We have birth doulas, obviously. That's where I first encountered the term, like midwives. And then I learned about death doulas, who are, holding our hands as we, metaphorically or literally, as we pass from this life on to the next. And an abortion doula is the same thing. It's just someone who's going to hold your hand while you go through this life-changing event. So again, there are many places in the revolution. Some of it is hand-holding, some of it is brick throwing, but some of it is hand-holding. And I don't want any of you hand-holders out there to think that you're not as important as a brick thrower. I have my notions about the utopia, but I always come back to Stokely Carmichael, who was like, pacifism requires that your opponent have a conscience for pacifism to work. I'm not directly exactly quoting it, but that's the idea, in order for pacifism to work, you have to assume that your opponent has a conscience. And Stokely went further to say the United States of America has none. The United States of America has no conscience. I think we are the conscience. I think we are the conscience of our nations, of our global world. I know that I want to throw bricks, but I have to go back to Bex Muey, who was like, maybe we're better off building with those bricks instead of throwing them. I'm working on it. People. I want to believe that a revolution of love and joy is enough. I want to believe that. I want to believe that with all my heart. So I'm going to keep working on that faith. Faith is work for me as like a born cynic with an anxiety disorder. Like faith is what I'm always trying to work toward. I often say that faith is the opposite of anxiety. Anxiety is like, you think something bad is going to happen, but you're not sure what, and you're not sure why. And sometimes you do know exactly what the bad things are going to happen. And faith is the opposite. Like anxiety is like having this sense that things are going to go wrong. And faith is having this sense that things are going to go right. Having this sense that things are going to be okay. And I recently took a trip to Brooklyn. There was a Briar Peerage exhibit that I wanted to see. So I took the opportunity to go and see Judy Chicago's Dinner Party, which my mother had seen when it originally came out and went on tour. And she brought the book home. And I was a kid. I was maybe 6 or 7. And I remember just flipping through the book and flipping through it and flipping through it. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I found out that it was permanently housed in the Brooklyn Museum. But by then it was COVID. So I just kind of had to sit and wait. But it was so interesting to me because I ended up meeting up with a couple of our coven mates who live there, who really helped me out and really made my trip a lot easier and more enjoyable and less work. And I also saw the dinner party, which is just like the whole work is about working together and lifting each other up and the strength and power of community. Because again, Judy Chicago, what the work is about is that, but in practice, Judy Chicago didn't make it by herself. There was a team of dozens and dozens and dozens of people who worked together to make this piece. And then I got to I saw the artwork, and then I went and acted it out in the city, working together to make each other's lives easier. So again, I was like struck with this, like the witchcraft of the symbolic and the material, and how these things are always working in tandem together, the symbolic and the material, the symbolic and the material. And that's what I took away from the trip, is that I can have faith in a community that I am a part of. I can have faith that there are Judy Chicagos out there making feminist art that is going to be housed in museums for hopefully hundreds of years, that will inspire people looking at it decades later and hopefully again hundreds of years to come. It's an exercise in faith. I have to exercise my faith, I guess is my point, like a muscle. And sometimes you get validation. It's like when you're working toward a goal, some goals are a little more quantifiable than others, and some goals are not quantifiable at all, but you get these like messages like, yes, big yes. And I took a trip that was a big yes, and it helped me to have faith that we can make a revolution with love. I'm not sure, but I believe. And that's going to have to be good enough for me right now.
I think that's the definition of faith, right? You don't know, but you're going to choose to believe. And I think that's the message for the end of this episode, right? Exercise your faith, choose to believe that you have a right to own your body. First of all, don't fuck people who don't think that. if you need help getting away from those people, find your networks, find your mutual aid societies, reach out to our coven, reach out to those organizations, women's shelters, women's networks, Planned Parenthood, that have been working on this work for decades. There is a massive infrastructure of support.
And at the risk of self-promotion, if you feel like you don't have a community, you can join our Patreon for as little as $1 US per month. And we have had so many of our coven mates tell us about the relationships that they've created independently, you know, with other coven mates, without Risa and I. You know, we just made the space, and then we sort of, you know, you can't see me, right? Sometimes I forget. I held my arms.
Yeah.
Risa can see me, but you can't. So she got what I was doing, but maybe you didn't. So yeah, I held my arms out in a like, come hug me sort of Jesus Christ pose.
Come hug me, Jesus Christ.
Come hug me, Jesus Christ. Again, I'm a Bible apologist. I'll take it. But come join us on Patreon. We have so many really validating things going on there at all times, and you'll get access to our Discord server, which means that you don't need Risa and I at all. At that point, you can just completely build your
just
own
hang. Yeah.
Because I mean, again, community is something that is harder than it should be. It's harder to find than it should be. It should be so fucking easy. And, you know, maybe we can make it a little bit easier. You know, we have done our best. We are human, but we have done our best to make a safe and brave space. And we invite you to join us there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We love you.
Yeah. And exercise your faith like a muscle.
Exercise your faith like a muscle. Don't fuck people who don't believe you have a right to bodily autonomy. These are key takeaways, I think.
Yeah. I mean, again, these are
Take
first date
naps.
questions. These are icebreakers as far as I'm concerned. Like, you know, how do you feel about the word feminist? That's an icebreaker. That's like weather talk.
Warm it up. Ruin Christmas, ruin birthdays. Come join the coven.
Because the thing is, other people's discomfort isn't the only discomfort that matters. Your discomfort also matters.
Right.
So if someone is willing to make you uncomfortable, then, you know, do unto others as they would choose to do unto you.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, we just can't be quiet. Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you.
Mm-mm.
We know this for sure, not just because Audre Lorde said it, and so we can have faith that it's right, but to avoid the cult of personality and the traps of that, let's just look at the sentence, like, your silence will not protect you.
It doesn't. They come for us all.
Yeah.
Fascism comes for us all. It's a death cult that just wants to use every body that it can, every piece of life force that it can. It's not individuals. It's like what Amanda Yates Garcia talks about as an egregore. It's a emergent property of a complex system. It's consumption out of control. It's consumption that has become an identity. It's consumption that's become forward momentum. It's consumption as an out of control spell. It eats minds and countries and people. So we resist it by exercising our faith and doing our magic and taking care of each other, I think.
Right. Mutual aid is a counterspell to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, less a fucking be.
Less a fucking be.
You must be a witch.
Just a reminder that the Missing Witches podcast is entirely listener funded. If you love the project and want to support us and join in on conversations like this one live, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/missingwitches.